And good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Order Paper Show. So we are going a bit off schedule tonight to what we normally do. Normally we cover bills. We don't normally cover urgent debates on Dunedin Hospital or the Manawatu Gorge Replacement Road. Well, they haven't done an urgent debate on that one about the tolls. But tonight we are going to dedicate our first hour to our show to about the Dunedin Hospital urgent debate that happened in Parliament, because there's a very big issue. My brother's spent a few years down Dunedin. My brother's mother, Kim, is from Dunedin. Grandma Vivian, being Kim's mother, is also from Dunedin. My good old favourite councillor on the Dunedin City Council, Mandy Mayhem Bollocks, from Dunedin. Basically, you know, the ties of there is, you know, Dunedin. And in the South Island, south of Blenheim, I've spent more days in Dunedin than I've spent hours in Christchurch. If that gives a great example of how I feel about Dunedin. However, I was a little bit annoyed. The Tyree Gorge Railway didn't reopen until a week after I dropped Tilly's car off back in 2020. So, yeah. So let's kick off with our panel, being our good old favourite Laura, who's joining us again, and we've got my friend Troy Mihaka, who we stood against each other for Greater Wellington Regional Council in 2019. God, that's it's been about 5 years ago.
Seems like we've all lived many lifetimes since 2019.
Oh, yeah. But yes, it's interesting. The It's in the Ballot format was born out of that election, funny enough. And thankfully for you to be, you and myself to be two of the 25 people standing for 5 positions. But to be honest, who wanted to be a councillor during COVID?
Yeah, I imagine it was quite a time. And just watching our friends who were there in any of the councils across the country, it was a lot of hard work, and they all did a very good job in staying sane.
Yeah, especially when you have the ignorant ratepayers who don't know the law but know it brilliantly, get their waggy finger out to tell you to do something illegal and criticise you for following the law to the letter.
You gotta love those soft sits.
Oh, I know. And it's quite intriguing how it goes. So yes, let's kick off for the debate, and we'll now the person who moved moved to have the bill to have the urgent debate was Tracy McCullen. So let's kick off with Tracy's debate over how she started this. We'll put it on 1.5 speed so we can try and get through as many of these speeches as possible, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, there's a few of them there. I'm not sure if we're going to get to all of them, but we'll get to the decent ones, and we'll leave some of the more, shall we say, fluff for another time.
Urgent public business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I so move that we debate the report of the new Dunedin Hospital.
Sweet now.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, you're right.
Mr. Speaker, today the government released a report, an independent expert readiness review on New Dunedin Hospital. And today the government, via 2 of the ministers, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Infrastructure, held a press conference in concert with this report and in reference to this report, but in essence to make their own announcements and the fact that they were no longer committed to building Dunedin Hospital as had previously been the case. In fact, before the election, Dr. Shane Retty, then spokesperson for Health in opposition, campaigned rigorously and explicitly on the fact that not only would the National Party reverse some minor changes that Labour was making to the new Dunedin Hospital, but it would be fully funded in budget, and that they would build Dunedin Hospital as always envisioned in the beginning. And today they poured cold water all over that. They have broken their promises not only to the people of Dunedin, the people of Otago, the rural communities of Otago, South Otago and Southland, throughout a huge and important regional part of this country, for no other reason than some basic cost saving. Mr. Speaker, broken promises is a phrase that can be bandied around, but when something as blatant as this, and something that considers the number one issue in Dunedin and the number one issue for people throughout the South is just dismissed as a cost-saving exercise, then I think the word broken promises is nothing short of incredibly accurate. The government backtracking on this promise to fully fund and build the new Dunedin Hospital as originally promised not only breaks this promise, but it leads to other consequences, particularly when we think about the erosion of health services, particularly when we think about the flow-on effects of that for the people in not only the South, but for the people, all people of New Zealand. And the audacity, the absolute audacity, those ministers had today to stand there at a press conference and pit other regions against the Dunedin region as a means by which to justify the fact that they are trying to save money. The audacity of saying, but if we build Dunedin Hospital, as has already been designed, as has already been clinically approved and clinically picked over to the 9th, as has been value managed and reviewed and reviewed and reviewed, as has had cut all fat out of the system already, if we build you this hospital that we're pretty sure we can't make any more compromises on, then the poor people of Nelson, the poor people of Taranaki, the poor people of Hawke's Bay, the poor people of Tauranga will miss out on their regional health facilities as well. And how dare they couch this callous announcement, this cynical cost-saving exercise, by blaming it on other people and blaming it on people that may have a visceral reaction to that as if it's their own fault. Madam Speaker, Mr Speaker, I should say, we've talked about the health system erosions, but one of the things that the authors of this report, the New Dunedin Hospital Review, mentioned in their review, and I would like to acknowledge the authors. There were several reviewers, including the lead author, Robert Rust, who I know is an expert and has many years of huge contribution to health services across Australasia. And the report is interesting. It gives several recommendations across those various domains of governance, across the domains of scope and services, and across the domains of cost. And I must say, I was quite surprised that when I came to the cost recommendations, whilst almost all of it is redacted, so it's hard for us to make definitive assumptions and have definitive knowledge about the position, but it wasn't that emphatic. There was lots of sentences that used the words probably and possibly and things like that. So I think for the government to catastrophise on the basis of this report and break its promise to the people of Dunedin and Otago is disgraceful. In Southland. South Island, essentially. But that's the theme, isn't it? Now, we also knew that there would be opposition from officials. We know that Te Whatu Ora were essentially strong-armed in presenting some options for cuts previously to this project, and none of them were particularly pretty. Health New Zealand's Southern Leadership Team had said any scope reduction of any form is ill-advised and will increase ongoing operational costs, reduce clinical functionality, decrease the likelihood of us realising the patient flow and efficiency benefits of the new Dunedin Hospital, and lead to higher costs in the medium to long term for Te Whatu Ora. Because that's the thing when you're trying to chop some costs out of the capex, isn't it? Sometimes it's the operational expenses that suffer, not to mention all the other health inefficiencies that flow on. Madam Speaker, Mr Speaker, I should say,
Thank you.
thinking about these very specific recommendations, and the first thing that came to mind when I looked at the report, which is considered, and it has some really good advice in it, is how are the people of Dunedin going to react about this? And I say Dunedin in this instance because I know on Saturday there is a rally being organised. They have endured and suffered through months now of uncertainty about what this new government had planned for this development. They have heard bits and pieces of information. They have heard the Minister of Health in particular, and sometimes the Minister of Infrastructure, talk out of both sides of their mouth, quite frankly, about promising a hospital for Dunedin, or promising, a service consideration for Dunedin without actually committing in the way that the previous government had. And the outcry from the people of Dunedin, because they won't be happy, and they know that they have one tool available to them at this moment, and that is their very, very strong, their very, very concerted, and their very, very unified voice. And I'm sure that if Christopher Luxton had visited Dunedin during the election campaign or during the election period, he may have had a taste of what that feels like. But given that this government has now chosen a slash and burn ideology project, instead of finding a way around this dilemma, I can only imagine that Shane Retty will be passing that information on to the Prime Minister about what he could expect when he visits Otago next time. Not really. So, Mr Speaker, when we think about the impact on services, I think we run a real possibility here of getting the worst of both worlds. The more we absolutely know, the more we don't delay this project, the higher the costs become. When we look on the government's red list, which is now up to 20 projects nationally, and when we look and compare that to 6 months ago, the costs have gone up hugely. Of those same 18 comparable projects, none of which have moved off that red list, but the amount of money that is concerned with those projects has risen by $640 million already. So sitting around and reviewing this hospital again will not do anything other than cost more money, and that therefore leaves us in a situation where we have a lesser hospital that costs more than what we could have if we'd just done it properly in the first place. This reminds me of the ferries debacle, a new government coming and going, gosh, that's a big price tag, coincidentally around $3 billion, and saying we must scrap it, even though they had no plan B and no ability to do anything afterwards. Now, they've looked at this and they've gone, that's an awful lot of money, and have made a knee-jerk reaction to make the wrong decision and to put the whole project into a precarious state, let alone the community. Mr Speaker, it's not only about broken promises, it's not only about the impact on services, it's not only about the community outcry, and I look forward to joining the people in Dunedin on Saturday as they vent their expressions and they have an opportunity to react to this government's announcements as they can on Saturday. But it is also about looking forward to the future. If the current Minister of Health can't get his head around an infrastructure program and an infrastructure plan and has to make these types of decisions, then I can only feel genuinely concerned for the people of Nelson and for the people of all those other regions, but not because Dunedin Hospital gets their hospital, but because this Minister is not competent to make the tough decisions and to do it when needed.
She's full on that one there, and it's interesting watching it on 1.5 speed. But to be honest, there's so much we wouldn't be able to sit there and cover it all. Troy, you're from the area. Please tell me some facts and figures about Dunedin Hospital and why a full-scale hospital development is needed.
Well, when it comes down to why it's needed, we so often see in the media them talking about the comparison of Dunedin's population size. Dunedin Hospital doesn't just service the Dunedin area. As Tracy said in her speech just then, it services the area of both Otago and Southland. South of Christchurch, there's only one major trauma centre, and that is Dunedin. And when we compare Dunedin, or the area of Otago and Southland, I know a lot of North Islanders have not been down here before, but Otago and Southland combined is roughly 64,000 square kilometres, which is slightly larger than half of the entire North Island. And that area, with a population of 350,000 people, has only the one major trauma centre. So when it comes to building a hospital like this, the reason that we need something that large that actually works for the modern growing population is because otherwise the only alternative is to take them to Christchurch, which is another 4 hours further. So if they've come from Invercargill 2.5 hours south, then they've got so much further to go just to get medical care.
And I mean, also, if we say you get snow, which I do know in the South Island, you have snow, you're not even going to get to. You might not even get from Invercargill to Dunedin, let alone to Christchurch.
Well, for dealing with the snow, we have what I found out is a uniquely New Zealand way of dealing with it, or originally was a uniquely New Zealand way of dealing with it, which is that down in Otago we have more medical helicopters than the rest of the country combined.
Oh.
Yeah, so a lot of our health services actually run and conducted by those medical helicopters because getting people around as fast as possible matters. So if you do have a patient in Queenstown Hospital who needs clinical care, urgent clinical care that Queenstown can't provide, the fastest way to get them to Dunedin is going to be on that helicopter. So the helicopters come in incredibly important for dealing with things like the snow, the geography, the mountains, the forests, but also just the sheer distance that we have to travel.
Yes, and I definitely do know that, considering where the airport is in relation to the city, is like my brother got caught out the first time when he moved to Dunedin was with a $100 cab ride. As an example, knowing where the airport is in relation to the city.
Well, this might blow your mind, but there is actually a second airport in Dunedin that the medical helicopters use. It's closer to town, but it's still in Mosgiel.
Does that have the avgas refueling facilities?
It does have refueling facilities. It's also where the Fonterra freight base is.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, that's definitely. And now the other one is Otago University. Now I think we did this just off the air. What is Otago University on the international rankings for a medical school?
So, as a university as a whole, Otago University at the moment is ranked as the 214th top university in the world. But when you consider just anatomy and physiology departments, they're ranked at number 40 for everywhere in the world. So they are one of the top ranked med schools in the world. Additionally, you've then got dentistry, which is also ranked as number 30. So you've got these very high ranking, very top quality facility training areas that are related to that hospital and do require that hospital to be up and working at a decent rate. Additionally, not only is it used as a teaching facility, but medicine and education is one of New Zealand's biggest exports. I believe it's now the fourth largest export for New Zealand. So making sure that it is of a international quality is really in New Zealand's best interest to make sure that we have the best training facilities possible.
So makes sense. So should we kick off the next speech from Nicola Willis?
Yep.
Okay, let's see what Nicola, our Minister of Finance, says.
Honourable Nicola Willis.
Well, Mr. Speaker, members across this House agree that the people of Dunedin and its surrounding regions deserve and need a modern, fit-for-purpose set of hospital facilities. Now, that commitment to the people of Dunedin was first made in 2017. And when that commitment was made, Mr. Speaker, the people of Dunedin had a right to expect that by now, that hospital would have been delivered. In fact, in 2018, December of 2018, the government of the time announced that the hospital would be built in 2 stages, with the outpatient and day surgery building fast-tracked, and the larger inpatient building due to be finished either 5 or 6 years after that. But as we stand here today, Mr. Speaker, in Dunedin, on the ill-chosen site for the Dunedin Hospital, there is steel in the ground, but not enough progress. And we, as an incoming government, have been faced with a significant set of challenges. Because the reality of opposition, Mr. Speaker, is that you observe projects from the outside and you remain hopeful that the government of the day has things under control. But what we found on assuming office, Mr Speaker, was that the Dunedin Hospital project was anything but in control. In fact, one of the first major capital budget decisions we had to make for the health sector was to put aside an additional $300 million for the Dunedin Hospital. So I would ask members opposite to desist from the false claim that we have reduced funding for this project. In fact, one of our most significant decisions was to immediately increase funding for this project in recognition of the fact that the costs had blown out so significantly that it would be impossible to deliver it without that extra funding. What we found, Mr Speaker, was a project that has in fact been plagued with problems since, I think, the most ill-fated decision which was made in 2018, and that was in May, when the government of the day announced that the new hospital would be built on the old Cadbury chocolate factory site and parts of the surrounding blocks. Now, I know that that decision at the time seemed magical, because for the people of Dunedin, the sadness of seeing that site unoccupied would be met with a new hospital. But actually not much work was done to assess whether that was a good site for the new hospital. And what was found, and I reference here, Mr Speaker, the advice we have received from experts, was that the extraordinary cost premiums associated with the land purchase, together with the demolition costs, contaminated ground, piling difficulty, flood level risk, and, Mr Speaker, an extremely constrained construction site flanked on three sides by state highways made it an extremely unattractive project for contractors and suppliers, which further drove up construction costs. And, Mr Speaker, these numbers I find compelling, so I wish to share them with the House. Since the 2017 business case, the cost per square metre to build the hospital has tripled, from $10,000 per square metre to $30,000 per square metre. So, Mr Speaker, it is not our job in government or my job today to lament where those poor decisions have led us. It is our job to get on and deliver a hospital for the people of Dunedin. And we have set about doing that in the most responsible manner in which we can. And so today, you have seen the Minister of Health and the Minister for Infrastructure go to Dunedin to be upfront with the people there about the choices that we face. And we have released the Rust report, which has objectively analysed whether or not the Dunedin Hospital project can be delivered within budget. And what that report makes clear is that even with the additional $300 million that this government is committed to adding to the existing appropriation for this project, even with that, the project is highly unlikely to be delivered in budget. And so we do have a choice at that juncture, Mr Speaker. The choice that we have is that we can, on the one hand, carry on lifelessly ignorant to that fact, or, Mr Speaker, we can take steps to get it back on track. We have chosen the latter course. And what we have presented are two options that we are considering in good faith, and that we wish to know from the people of Dunedin that they know we are considering these two options. The first option is to revise the project specification and scope and within the existing structural envelope. And the second option is a staged development on the old hospital site, including a new clinical services building and refurbishing the existing ward tower. Now, Mr Speaker, I have absolute clarity from members opposite that they think that there is no amount of money that would be too much for Dunedin Hospital. And I put to you, Mr Speaker, that that just can't be the case. Because actually, when we make choices about the way we spend New Zealanders' money, there are always opportunity, costs and trade-offs. And the advice that we have received tells us that this project is on course to blow out millions and millions of dollars more. Now, those are millions of dollars that we wish to invest in health infrastructure. Mark my words, Mr Speaker, we will be investing more every year in health infrastructure across this country, because despite their rhetoric, the last government wasn't very good at getting new hospital buildings built. It wasn't very good at actually redeveloping facilities or using money for good effect in the health system. So, what we are going to do is have to do work across our hospital system, in Whangarei, in Nelson, in Tauranga, in Invercargill, where there are suboptimal facilities, where upgrades are required. And so the choice that we have to confront is whether it is in that context appropriate to let this project continue down its sad, sad path of cost blowout after cost blowout after cost blowout. And the choice that we have made is to be pragmatic and upfront with New Zealanders that it's time actually for us to take some sensible steps to control those costs. And I'm going to be very interested, Mr Speaker, to see whether Aisha Vera will stand up and tell us that she is proud of the decision-making that occurred over the past 6 years in relation to this project. Because what we have found is a pattern of actually completely inadequate planning occurring and a reluctance to confront emerging problems. What we have seen is that the last government knew this project was going wildly off course and chose not to take steps to bring it back on track. It actively chose not to do that, and instead, I believe, ultimately was pulling the wool over the eyes of both the people of Dunedin, but actually us as an opposition, because we were not in a position to know how badly things were actually going in this project until we assumed office and were given the ability to look at all of the information about it. Mr Speaker, one of the facts that has surprised me about it, which I can barely believe, is that the actual business case for the project was still being developed while the project was being built. Which I'd love to hear members opposite explain to me how that is good practice. That despite the years that had been spent on the project, there was still no clear plan for the pathology lab, no plan for the refurbishment of the existing facilities, no plan for the car parking, and all of that was estimated to cost hundreds of millions more, but hadn't been included in the overall plans. And what we see is a haphazardness. And I'll tell you something that happens when you do that, Mr Speaker, which is that those who are building the project and are involved in the project see you coming. They see you coming and they say, this is a government that can't even put together a business case. It can't even be clear about the timelines for this project or what its budget parameters are. So it gives them complete ability to continue down a path of excessive costs. And it's time, actually, that we were realistic, that we were clear that every project, no matter how important, still must face some budget constraints. And I want to finish these remarks, Mr Speaker, by saying this. Delivering people really good health facilities so that our nurses and doctors and health workers can operate in modern facilities that allow them to effectively and efficiently deliver services is an important challenge for New Zealand. Dunedin deserves good facilities, other parts of the country too. We will invest more money in this, but we'll also deliver plans and budgets that work.
Scott Willis.
I find it a little bit strange that any politician would go after the location and the chosen site for the Dunedin Hospital, because when that idea of building the new Dunedin Hospital was floated, there were 2 other sites that were in mind that were suggested. Both of them were outside of the CBD, but the original discussion actually talked about how building a hospital of the size that was required in the centre of Dunedin was going to be next to impossible, given as Dunedin is a largely industrialised city with very limited space on where something like this could be built. So when the Cadbury factory came up, it was, Nicola Willis described it as a miracle, I believe, but it was lucky and fortunate that this was happening. But the problems that she is highlighting, they existed beforehand and they were well known about. We know the land was reclaimed. We know the area had been industrial. We know there were services that had to be fixed. And during the scope and the planning of this project, yes, they had to be taken into account, but that was accounted for in the costing. So I'm confused that it's being brought up again now.
Yeah, I mean, like the other one is like saying it's next to 3 state highways.
That is correct. You've got State
Is
Highway
that a bad thing?
divided in 2, and then running right through the centre of the inpatient and outpatient building is State Highway 88 that connects the port to Dunedin. So it is a very difficult place and challenging place to have been building on. There was discussion about moving State Highway 1 to make it more available for the contractors, but unfortunately the general public didn't think that was a good idea, and given the way that our traffic has increased in Dunedin, frankly, I think it wouldn't have been a good idea.
Because I mean, the other one is being next to a state highway, particularly State Highway 1, has some sense to that. You know, considering, like, as you know from Wellington, like, it's a little bit better now since we have the cycle lane and the bus lane down Adelaide Road. But effectively, trying to get from the Terrace Tunnel to Wellington Hospital, what can be like in peak could be an absolute like guess which way to drive, and we're so and a lot of like if they're coming from Waititi or they're coming from Mosgiel, they're going to be coming down a state highway in an ambulance. They're not going to unless they come by air, they're not likely to be coming down a back gravel country road.
Additionally, with that location not only being on the state highway to make it really accessible and good for people to access, being in the centre of town, it's next to the city bus hub, it's also right next to the university. And being as it's a core part of the med school and that training facility, having a site right next to the university was hugely prioritised, because the second option that they had available of the 3, the one that we were leaning most towards, was actually just outside of Dunedin, closer to Mosgiel, where the population is growing faster, but it was further away from a university, which meant it wouldn't be as accessible as a training facility for the students who were working there or the university staff who also work in the hospital.
When you're talking about there, I'm just on Google Maps at the moment, would that be like Fairfield, Abbotsford area?
Burnside. Just before Abbotsford, as you're coming down the Southern Highway, as you come over Lookout Point, there's a big open field. On the right-hand side, there's an old factory. It used to be Kemp Thorne Prosser. It's actually a film studio at the moment, but that was something that had been talked about as using for a site as a hospital.
So just for those who are wondering, so here is the map of, so Burnside is, what's it called? It's roughly where my mouse is, but that doesn't mean, I gather the mouse is not actually transferring onto the screen. Effectively, so that's where Burnside is, which is next to the Dunedin Southern Motorway. And where the current site where they're building is in the guts of this, this section here, which if we go through here, there's the Octagon, there's the railway station over here, and here's the current hospital, which is virtually, as you could say, virtually across the road from where it is.
That was also something that was prioritised as well, because when they looked at the construction, they talked about administration, and this is also right next door to the current administration block that's been used by the Southern DHB, which means that's one less building to have to build.
Yeah, and also here's Otago University, just to put things into comparison for those who are watching from home on that one of just putting in there. And I'm doing my best to navigate Dunedin.
Yeah, I mean, what I heard a lot of was Nicola Willis just saying, ignore us, blame Labour, blame Labour, blame Labour, blame Labour. The fact that they could do this to Dunedin Hospital, it really highlights the fact that they could pretty much do it to any other hospital. There's other hospitals that need upgrading. right?
Hutt Hospital.
Yeah.
Was it Palmerston North?
Yeah.
Nelson.
Yep. There's other hospitals that need upgrading, and Nicola's just like, hey, forget the fact that I didn't account for this, and did a whole bunch of tax cuts and cancelled the ferries and did a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to end up costing us more money. Blame Labor.
Yeah, Laura, you're correct. It was a lot of blaming Labor.
Yeah.
But what I'm really confused by is that the majority of the changes, the things that she's talking about, the pathology lab, the car parking building, those are all changes that National wanted to introduce into this hospital.
Oh,
those were
really?
National's idea.
So they're blaming themselves?
They weren't included in the original scope because the government didn't, the previous government didn't want to include them based on the fact that those things were either readily available or for whatever other reason. So when National came into power, one of the first things they said was staff car parking. And now it's the staff car parking that they're saying is the reason that this is costing too much.
I can't help but laugh. This is, my God.
The whole thing.
I've got a cat that's just joined me.
Now Wellington Hospital, 80% of the staff work between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. during the day. And actually, if we actually go into it, it's more like 8 to 6. It's Dunedin virtually the same, and the public transport during the day starts at like 5, 6 a.m. in the morning and goes through till
ends at 9 p.m. on weekdays.
Ends at 9 p.m.
Yeah, so yes, the staff car park was needed, and you just showed us on the map the location of where the hospital was going to be, right between the Octagon, where the nightclubs are, and the university campus, where the young people going to the nightclubs live. So actually, to keep the staff safe, yes, there should have been a staff car park in there from the very beginning. However, because it was introduced later on in the stage, it's not been costed, it's not been planned. And that's $485 million, according to the report.
Oh, God.
Sorry, my cat turned off my camera. Piggy! He's like, pay attention to me.
But if we can go back to Laura's point, I think, of Nicola Willis telling us that this is too much money, when Nicola Willis just, what did they work out? $2.85 billion tax cuts to those who own rental properties.
It's like, hey, listen here. You can have your money back. I want Dunedin to have a hospital.
Yes.
It's like, I don't want the tax cut.
$14.8 billion of tax cut changes over the next 5 years, which per year is roughly $3 billion. So she's asking where this money can come from.
We've got some breaking news from our remote editor. It's Labour's fault Laura's camera got turned off, not the cat's.
True. I'm going to blame Labour on that one.
I thought that would be quite a good one to sit there and put out there. Yeah. Should we see what Nicola Willis's namesake, has to say?
We'll try again. Scott Willis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it has been enlightening to hear from the National Party, with 2 national ministers in Dunedin today, willing to say anything to get elected, but simply can't be trusted. Because failing to confirm to build the Dunedin Hospital to its full capacity is a complete betrayal and an utter kick in the guts for Dunedin. Yes, Dunedinites are angry. Actually, they're furious to see 2 ministers shape up in Dunedin and give us what they've given us today. We can't trust this government one iota. They slither and squirm away from any clear answer. Dunedin and the Deep South community is like no other. We're a hardy lot down south, but we deserve access to healthcare, not leaking roofs in existing buildings. We don't deserve stressed doctors, nurses who want to go to Australia because they can't cope with the stress this health system's under, pathologists who don't know where on earth they're going to be cited. This government is bleeding our health system to death to fund trickle-down tax cuts. Dunedin deserves a government that works for people on planet, not this coalition of cuts. The health of our people has to come before the pockets of the wealthy. And we need desperately to invest in our health system so it's fit to cater for all of our needs in our communities. And on Saturday, we're going to show the coalition government exactly how we feel. Because you know what ticks me off? Suggesting that $3 billion for health for the Deep South is unaffordable. And when $3 billion for a hospital complex, when the government tells us that $10 billion to explore a possible tunnel for Wellington is cheap as chips. Cheap as chips, $10 billion to explore a tunnel for Wellington. How much have we spent on potholes? We're spending $5 billion on potholes. We're spending $1.4 billion to adapt the road around the Dunedin Hospital, but not on healthcare. So do you think people are a bit mad in the Deep South? You're telling me they are. If this government gets one vote out of Dunedin at the next election, I will be surprised. Because this government has accelerated a funding crisis for universities as well, including the University of Otago. This government's massively slashed research funding for Dunedin's Crown Research Institutes. And now we see this betrayal of every Dunedinite, seeking to divide rather than build, as promised, the Dunedin Hospital. And we haven't yet had time to fully understand what the Coalition's Dunedin Hospital's downgrade will mean, because they're slithering and squirming away from any detail. But two things are really clear. This is National's biggest broken election promise, and it is one that they can't shaft off to their minor coalition partners either. This is all on National. Did they even look at the cost increases that Labor was blaming on their own proposed downgrades when National loudly proclaimed and promised to deliver on a full bill during the election campaign? What did Michael Woodhouse say? Michael Woodhouse, I know they kicked him out, but he said the South deserves a hospital to be fit for purpose for generations, not a patch-up job. And that's what we've got, Mr. Speaker. That's what we've got, a patch-up job by a government that doesn't know what they're doing. They're cancelling the link between the islands. They are cancelling healthcare. So what we're seeing today is their strategy to deflect their dishonesty by turning people against each other, by proposing that reasonable healthcare in the South is going to detract from others, when in fact this government wants to spend money on useless projects like looking at tunnels in Wellington. This government does not care for our communities. If this government gets a vote out of Dunedin, it'll get Mark Patterson's vote perhaps, but will it get any others? I doubt. Because what gives me hope is our community, and we're not taking this sitting down. We are strong together, and I look forward to joining in what will be the biggest protest march in our city for a long, long time on Saturday. Because on Saturday we march for our city, we march for our region, and we march for the Dunedin Hospital.
I know I'm going to come across as biased when I say that, but good on you, Scott. That was a damn good speech.
Troy, how many children does Michael Woodhouse and Mrs. Woodhouse have that are still living in Dunedin?
You're probably going to know that answer better than I am.
I was going to say, Mr. and Mrs. Woodhouse would be too, but I don't know about the children. But that's how many votes they're probably going to get out of Dunedin, not just Mark Patterson's.
I just had a look because I was curious to know, looking at this ideology in this government, that of what is going on as they talk about ideology. If they wanted to save a little bit of money, it would have cost them, according to stuff, it would have cost them around $1.3 million just to rebrand all the buildings to take the Māori names into second instead of first. So there's a bit of savings they could have used.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know what te whatuora means. I can't see the other words. Oh, you've got to put the English first. Oh, what does coulda? Oh.
Sorry, I'm blind to English. I can only see te reo Māori.
Even the international studies have shown that if you have a situation of a majority and a minority language, is that you put the majority one second because people remember the second one more than they remember the first part of it anyway. It's psychological. Otherwise they're going to go, coulda. Sorry, I'm trying to find the school. I only see couldas here.
What's a kura?
I like what Scott had to say, especially when he started by talking about exactly what we were just talking about before, and the tax cuts that no one in this country wanted.
The one that delivered free Chubba Chup lollipops a week for me?
Oh, that capital gains tax is looking really nice right now.
Oh, their minimum $25 for me was $7.40 per week. That's all.
Yeah, and it's not like you can actually claim back your interest on your mortgage as a first-time buyer.
And see, I'm not for the argument of saying that Wellington shouldn't get infrastructure so that Dunedin can get a hospital. But what we have all highlighted, and what Scott highlighted, is that there are other areas where money has been spent that is incredibly not needed or has been wasteful. And now a hospital for 350,000 people is going to be limited.
Yeah, exactly. And that hospital is a vital piece of infrastructure, considering would Dunedin Hospital be technically classed as a tertiary hospital?
Dunedin Hospital is the major tertiary centre for the Lower South Island. So all of the regional hospitals, which in our case is just Queenstown and Invercargill, they transfer all of their patients to Dunedin when they get too full or reach capacity. Additionally, it also works as an important backbone for the entire New Zealand hospital system. So if any of the hospitals in the North Island get to capacity, those patients then have to be transferred to the next hospital that has capacity. So that was part of why Dunedin Hospital needed additional capacity, was to make sure that there was space if there was a disaster in Auckland. For instance, when the floods hit in Auckland, at the same time, they were talking about evacuating patients from Auckland Hospital so they could make space. Christchurch Hospital was also hit by a storm. So the only place they could send them at that time safely was Dunedin. So it is an important area to make sure that we have resilience across the entire national network.
Yeah, it's and it's about piggybacking off that. Like for Cardi White Island, have I got that one correct? When that happened, of the people affected by burns, like, okay, they wouldn't have gone to Dunedin, but some went to Middlemore, some went to Waikato, some went to Hutt, some went to Christchurch.
Yeah.
To deal with burns, because that's how our health system works. Sometimes resources sometimes aren't in the same places, but chuck them on a helicopter and you get them around there. And having slack in the system. I mean, a hospital's not a business.
And to keep costs at a reasonable level, rather than having every hospital specialise in everything, for the areas that don't necessarily see patients every single day, we often have the specialists spread out across the country in different locations, usually just depending on the availability of the specialist or of the resources. So Christchurch and Middlemore do specialise in burns. Dunedin, obviously, specialises in dentistry, but also bionics and artificial limbs. So any patients who need treatment for advanced dentistry issues already have to be transferred to Dunedin Hospital.
So who should we go off next? Aisha Verrill, the former Minister of Health?
Why not?
The near future.
Honourable Dr Aisha Verrill.
Madam Speaker, today is a milestone day on the slipping away of New Zealand's healthcare system to one characterised by cuts, cold-heartedness and underfunding. And it is a day in which we remark on the broken promise of the national government, who campaigned on building Dunedin the hospital that it needed. And it sought those votes with such a level of cynicism we see from what's been done today. The people of Dunedin need a new hospital. Their current hospital is unsuitable and it is unsafe. 500 instances of surgical equipment being contaminated every year. It is not a suitable place to be continuing treatment for people. It needs to be replaced. The scope reductions that will be entailed by what the government is embarking on will cause additional cost. That always happens when you build a hospital that is too small. It ends up costing you more down the line. But what I want to spend my time on today is the desperate political play that this government has done. We're seeing it here and we've seen it before. Let's go through it step by step. This report seems in many parts to be a very good report, the Rust Review. However, everything about the costings is blacked out. So I take no reassurance from the other side when they say there's being a $3 billion blowout. The word $3 billion is not in the report. It's nowhere. For those of you who got up with your government talking points and said that, go into the report and try and find it. This is a manufactured crisis about the cost of this hospital. The Rust Review says it probably could not be achieved within the existing appropriation. That doesn't mean certainly. That might mean it's a 50% probability or a 40% probability. But it is certainly not the case that the government has the right to claim that it's going to cost $3 billion. That is untrue. Where did this figure come from? Who knows? Well, I think if we admitted Chris Bishop to the gastroenterology department at Dunedin Hospital, we might be able to get a scope and find out where that $3 billion figure came from. Because it's utterly made up, and this is exactly the type of process we see when this government wants to cut healthcare. They make up a scandal. They said Health New Zealand was $1.4 billion over budget and they had to fire the board. They said it was because of back office bloat. They said it was because there was 14 layers of management. Well, we found out that was untrue. We found out they didn't have the organisational chart that Dr. Retty said there was. We found out they actually hired more nurses and it wasn't anything to do with the back office costs. And they did that in order to justify cutting staff out of our health system, and that's exactly what's going on with Dunedin Hospital. They have put out a report, they are manufacturing manufacturing a crisis. And then the worst thing is they're trying to play other communities off against Dunedin. That is so dirty. It's disgraceful. That's right. The fact is, if this government wasn't so reckless with its $2.9 billion tax cuts for landlords, there would be money to meet the needs of New Zealanders for their healthcare. If they weren't giving $216 million from Dr. Foster's party to a single tobacco company, we would be able to give New Zealanders the healthcare that they deserve.
Come back to the bill, to the motion.
So this cuts to New Zealand's hospitals are about the choices, the bad choices that this government has made. This is a deeply cynical political playbook we see from them over there again and again and again. They made a bad budget, they made reckless decisions, they bought their way into government with tax cuts, and then New Zealanders are paying the price. And Dunedinites are being asked to pay the price, and all the communities of Otago and Southland that hospital will support. Well, kia kaha to the people of Southland and Otago. I learned a lot of lessons from those people as a medical student in the old Dunedin Hospital. And one of the lessons that they taught me when I was learning to be a doctor was to take responsibility. Well, this government needs to stop blaming other people for its problems. It needs to take responsibility. I'm looking forward to seeing all the people in Dunedin out on the street on the weekend, and we can expect that this government understands just how much the people of the southern region think that this is a broken promise.
Damn, she hit them with a flamethrower. They're going to have to be admitted into the burn ward.
Someone's commented earlier, really loving Aisha lately, and honestly, I agree. She's really come into her stride as an opposition minister. She's been awesome to watch on the TV.
Yeah, she definitely gone from that heads down, tails up, get on with the job minister to being very, very fiery.
Mm-hmm.
She was not an MP I pictured to be a brilliant opposition MP. I pictured her as a great government MP, a quiet backbencher in opposition. I did not picture her to be as fiery as she is. And I mean, these are people who also know who probably go like, whoa, this is not the Aisha we know.
Yeah.
Someone commented that it's personal to her, and I mean, yes, clearly it is. But I think that the health system should be personal to all of us, and it's one of those things. It's really nice seeing Aisha getting really fired up about this up there in Parliament, because even though she studied here, she's not originally from Dunedin, and one of the things that we down here in Dunedin really feel is that the North Island barely knows we exist. In fact, we often find that North Islanders, when they talk about Dunedin, they know we have a university. They seem to think we're a small town. We have a whole city going on down here that most people just don't seem to know even exists.
Not to mention, Dunedin's supporting tons of smaller communities around us.
A lot of small communities around it.
Yes.
And
here's a random fact. I think it was Dunedin, but the old area code was 021. You'll probably know, Troy, because you're old enough to probably remember... was it 3-digit area codes and 5-digit landline numbers?
I remember 4-digit area codes, but I think 02 was maybe 02 was a target.
No, it was there's a random one where it was 021 was either Dunedin or Invercargill. So it was the bottom half of the North Island. South Island was 02 something, and 03 something was the north half under the old. Was it somewhere? 6-digit numbers with 2-digit area codes, some with 5-digit numbers with 3-digit area codes. Like Shannon's area code was 067 back at the time, and followed by 5-digit phone numbers. But Wellington at the same time were 2-digit area codes followed by 6-digit phone numbers based on the exchange equipment they had at the time before they standardised everything into 7 digits in 1991.
Well, to be honest, I grew up in Port Chalmers, so I actually wouldn't know what our original area code for Dunedin was, because until I was 6 years old, Port Chalmers was a separate city.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it wasn't. So was also Waititi a separate city?
Yeah, it was a separate town.
Because I know they're one of the areas that have community boards.
Correct.
Laura's
right. Dunedin supports a lot of small communities around it, and a lot of those small communities are also not as small as North Islanders think. I mean, Gore, for example, Gore is around 11,000 people. Like, that's not small. Queenstown is 30,000 people. Or Waimatu is sitting on 10,000 people. Like, Otago's not a small place anymore, and I think it comes up later on in the debate that there has been a lot of population growth. Yep. But when we look at the statistics of population growth across Otago, in the most recent census, if we ignore the percentages and look at the actual raw numbers of people who moved to an area, Dunedin had the highest growth of any urban centre outside of Auckland or Tauranga. So it is growing, it is expanding, and one of the biggest problems that we're having down here is also that our population is aging.
Yes.
We talk a lot about that in the news, but what people don't think about, in addition to our own population getting older, a lot of those people who are moving here are also already older, and they retire specifically to Dunedin for the nice weather in summer, or to Central Otago for the warm, dry weather, or to make wine. And so we've got this incoming, retiring to make wine is totally a thing.
Hey,
So there's
yeah.
incoming older population.
Even Shortland Street has that as one of their characters.
I love me
There's
some
a
wine
whole
and
TV
cheese.
series about it, Under the Vines.
Oh, isn't it an Australian one?
It's filmed in Alexandra with Rebecca Gibney.
Oh, I thought it was meant to be an Australian show.
Australia is allowed to make shows in other countries.
Well, that is true. Yeah, no, because I do also know the person they've got playing the husband is a British actor who was also known for playing Martin Charteris on The Crown.
Yeah, and then the farmhand is Trader Wiki, who does a lot of work at Silo and up in Auckland.
Let's go to your local MP, Rachel Brooking.
Yeah, it is interesting that the government benches don't want to take any more calls. Now, I would like to tell a little bit of a story from my perspective about Dunedin Hospital, because of course I'm very privileged to be the Member of Parliament for the great city of Dunedin. And in Dunedin we have a hospital, we have a tertiary hospital, and it is a training hospital for the medical school at the University of Otago where Dr. Aisha Viril trained some time ago. Now that hospital, there's never been any dispute until today where I hear from Honourable Mark Patterson that perhaps the tertiary hospital should be in Central Otago. That is a totally new thing to be hearing, because it has always been based in Dunedin as the city that then has to do that tertiary level care for the wider Otago and Southland regions. Of course, those areas also need hospitals, and the issue here is about the big tertiary regional hospital. National has said lots of things about this hospital over time. One former Minister of Health said Dunedin Hospital is not going to be a long-term preeminent tertiary hospital. He went on to say there is a reality that can't be voted away. New Zealand probably has too many doctors. Over the next 10 years, we will need fewer hospital beds than we currently do.
What?
That was the Minister Bill English in the late 1990s talking about the health system. And of course, we remember that when the Labour government came to government in 2017, the state of the infrastructure around New Zealand, the state of the hospitals, there were many stories about mould running down the walls in various hospitals around the country. And we heard then from the Minister for Finance, oh, well, this government, Labour, doesn't know how to build things because the whole of the new Dunedin Hospital isn't up yet. Well, at least Labour was building things. You can't knock things over if you're not building them in the first place. Now, National, to their credit, did say that they recounted from what Bill English had said, and they said they would build a hospital, a tertiary new hospital in Dunedin, and set up the Southern Partnership Group. In 2017, there was the decision on the location of the new hospital. And this is an outpatients building and an inpatients building. For anybody who's been to Dunedin recently and driven along the one-ways, you will have seen the new outpatients building that looks like a finished building. It's not finished, but it's looking good. The inpatients building is the building that the government members seem totally obsessing about the fact that it's built on a former chocolate factory, Madam Speaker. And it was so patronising to hear the Minister for Finance say that the Cadbury choice was somehow magical. It was not a magical choice. If anybody knows Dunedin, you know that there are many hills and there is not an abundance of flat land that is ready to be built on with significant vertical buildings. So this was a choice. It was in the middle of town. It was a choice that was made. And in that time, there was consenting, Madam Speaker. There was the acquisition of land as well. And of course, some of that consenting was done under a fast-track process that did not override environmental protections, because that can be done. Now, Madam Speaker, at the last election, when I was standing to be the Member of Parliament for Dunedin, National made many promises about this hospital. They promised that any changes that Labour had made to decrease the scope, so by 2 operating theatres, that they and a PET scanner and some shelled beds, they said, we're going to undo that. Shame on Labour for making any cuts. That was their promise. That was the spokesperson for National, Dr. Shirley, now the Minister of Health. He came to Dunedin, he said that, and Michael Woodhouse, Honourable Michael Woodhouse, who was standing against me, said it over and over again. What do we get when National is in government? We just get cuts, and that is all we can expect from this government. Cuts, cuts, cuts. So I look forward to seeing the people of Dunedin and the wider South on Saturday.
What we missed in Mark's speech from New Zealand First, it wasn't a huge amount, but since Rachel touched on it, is that he said that he thought that the hospital should be built in central Otago, since that's where the larger population growth is coming. But that's only in percentage-wise. And I'm a little bit disappointed to have learned from his speech that we missed that he obviously has not been to Dunedin, has not really looked at Otago or Southland, and does not know that Dunedin is bigger than the entire of the rest of Otago and Southland population combined.
I think a giveaway, if he knows a bit about things about MPs called proportional population. Under MMP, Dunedin has always had 2 MPs. Under first past the post, it used to have 3 MPs. I think there is 1 MP that covers pretty much from basically around the Tairiri border right up into Queenstown. I think there's another MP who sits around in Invercargill. Then there's another MP who's in Waititi North. And then if you get to Timaru, you've got Rangitata.
Yeah, so the New Zealand Constitution Act doesn't establish the size of electorates, but what it does say is that an electorate needs to be a maximum of 16 electorates in the South Island plus any additional Māori electorates, which means that electorates are capped at the size of 1/16 of the South Island. Which also means as Christchurch has gotten bigger, Dunedin and Invercargill have lost representation. And as you said, we now have 1 MP who covers this massive area the entire way from almost Wanaka, but Alexandra, Cromwell and Ranfurly, right the way down to everything except Invercargill.
Yeah.
Massive areas that we're covering.
I mean, if we talk about that one, I think we need to up the number of MPs in Parliament, but also change the population quota from 16 to 20 for the South Island and readjust the numbers going through from there and shift to 150 MPs. But that's a separate thing. That's not about the Dunedin Hospital.
In her talk just now, Rachel brought up the Environment Court, the decision about the height of the building. And one of the options that National have put forward is that they're suggesting that maybe a floor or 2 could be removed from the current design of Dunedin Hospital. However, there are some real problems with that when it comes to the Environmental Court, which are why it went to the Environmental Court. For one, because it's on reclaimed lands, there was a limit on how high it was allowed to be built until they came to the compromise of drilling down piles, which is one of the things that has led to an extra increase in cost, the requirement of the piles. But the reason it is the height that it is, currently, in current design, it'll be 60 meters tall. And on top of it, there'll be a helipad. At 60 meters, that'll make it the 2nd tallest building in the South Island. But most importantly, it will make it the tallest building in Dunedin. So the helicopter is unlikely to crash into any other building. So around that area, you've got the current Dunedin Hospital, which sits at around 56 meters tall. First Church sits around 58 meters tall. Knox Church sits around 54. And then a couple of the university buildings were over 50 meters as well. So if they were to take a floor off of it, then there's a chance that we wouldn't be allowed to have a helipad on top of that building. What is the point in a hospital in the center of town without a helipad?
Yeah, that's also a tertiary hospital for the bloody half of the South Island.
The current design also includes 2 helipads, so that if there is an emergency and patients have to be evacuated from elsewhere in New Zealand, then they can land, and increased rating to allow the military helicopters to land. Because the current helipad is rated to land 5-ton helicopters, but the military evac helicopters can go up to 8.5 tons. So they needed a big helipad. But yeah, this Environment Court decision is not something that the government foresaw in the beginning, because it's not something that anyone really would have thought about of, can we put a helipad here in the center of one of the most densely populated areas of New Zealand? I'm not sure we can. That turns out, this is the workaround. The other thing in the options that National have put forward is they've also suggested using and refurbing the existing hospital building. And I believe Ingrid talks a little bit about it in her speech as well. But the existing hospital building was built in the 70s. It is outdated. It wasn't built to be a hospital. It was built to be an office building, and then was later retrofitted. What during construction was retrofitted to become the new hospital. And at the time, it was only supposed to service the population of Dunedin as it was in 1975, not the population of Otago and Southland. So it's not fit for purpose at all.
I just don't understand the point of patching up what was essentially an office building for how much and how long is it going to last? So just build a damn new hospital.
Yeah, like Rachel said, flatland is at a premium.
Yeah.
But you're in the middle of building a hospital. Why are we stopping and doing it again? Like,
Yeah,
do we need a road that badly?
It's like half building. It's like the Wainuiamata road tunnel that stopped being drilled halfway through. That's a great way to describe it.
Or the terrace tunnel in Wellington, where they only built half of it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and the bridge pillars for the second bridge are still sitting there, which are currently a car park.
But see, this again is an interesting conversation because National had made a point about how New Zealand has been bad at building infrastructure and how they need to get better at building infrastructure. And yet they're not building the infrastructure they're in the middle of building.
Yeah.
Can we bring back the Ministry of Works? Is it too late?
I don't know. Troy definitely knows that one. Okay, let's hear from Ingrid.
Speaker.
Ingrid Leary.
What a shameful day for this government. What a shameful day to go out and election campaign to deliberately mislead voters, knowing that they had no intention ever of delivering on the promise of Dunedin Hospital. That is callous politics. It is throwing the people of the South under the bus, and now they are shamefully trying to gaslight people to say that there is this crisis that once again doesn't exist just to suit their political purposes. Madam Speaker, when I go door knocking most weeks, surveying my constituents about what is the most important issue in the electorate, what comes up first, time and time again, in every part of the electorate, whether it is in South Dunedin, whether it is Kaka Point, Balclutha, Middlemarch, right across the whole of the Taieri electorate, is access to healthcare and the new Dunedin Hospital. They are as important to the people of Taieri as the cost of living crisis. And that is because in my electorate, about a quarter of the population are over the age of 60. So healthcare is really important. And when they voted last election, many of them were sceptical about the National Party promises, but they desperately wanted access to healthcare. They saw the need for it. And they told me that had a very big bearing on how they voted. Well, those people will be so let down, the ones who put their faith in the national government. The fact that many of them didn't and that I stand here today as their representative shows that they have long memories of the type of antics that this government has done previously, where they've talked up the need for a hospital and then done absolutely nothing to deliver it. Madam Speaker, the other side, the government, are really misleading with their narrative around this hospital, and this has been clarified as well by the former Southern Partnership Chair, the Honourable Pete Hodgson. He's saying that the costs that they are anticipating of the blowout $3 billion, his word is absurd. What they have done to concoct this narrative is add pathology, the car park and a refurb costed at $400 million. They have talked up the problems of the site. The fact is that the hospital is not just about services, it is about the economic development and lifeblood of Dunedin being a centre of medical excellence, and that requires a hospital to have proximity to both the university and to the Polytech. All the issues that were mentioned by Nicola Willis have already been resolved. It was 2.7% of the total budget to do that remediation, and all of that work is now complete. The land was bought actually incredibly cheaply, $11 million, because Cadbury's wanted to get out of town. So there was already value for money in that purchase. And it's just so important that the hospital has a proximity to the university so that the medical school can remain the centre of excellence that we see so profoundly from Otago University. The fact of the matter is that this government basically hates the South Island. We've got plenty of evidence. They've destroyed the possibility of having the rail-enabled ferries, or it's looking very likely, that will ensure that the Hillside Workshop investment by the Labor government, the revitalisation of the Hillside Workshops, bringing so many jobs to my people in South Dunedin, they depend on rail-enabled ferries. And this government is now putting that into a very big question mark. That is bad news for Hillside. They don't care about the ramifications. They don't care about our roads. There are no roads of national significance anywhere around my electorate. In fact, the map from Waka Kotahi doesn't even have the South Island on it. And the worst bit, Madam Speaker, is that they prefer to put the tax breaks for big tobacco forced on this national government by a minor party ahead of the healthcare needs of New Zealanders and ahead of their promises to the people of the South, and that is the people of Dunedin, the people of Invercargill, all the people in the rural areas in between who find it so difficult to access healthcare and who have waited so long and fought so hard. Well, my message to them is make sure wherever you are on Saturday, come down to the Octagon at midday, put on your T-shirts and send a message to this government that you will not accept anything less than the hospital that they promised that they would deliver.
While I agree with Ingrid's point. She's correct that there are no roads of national significance anywhere around Dunedin. What I do find ironic, though, is that in her electorate, the government, as it currently stands, has given funding for an upgrade to public transport. But given the state of this government, I find that quite ironic.
I wonder where. That's the question. You know, a bus service from Dunedin to the airport?
No, it's the Princess Street area at the south of Dunedin, which is a very, very busy bus area. Most of the buses that go south or west from Dunedin travel through it. So upgrading the bus shelters and the bus network in that particular area. But again, she makes a really good point that this government has not really given much consideration to what it's like in Dunedin. So they are putting some funding into hillside workshops. And I understand that Shane Jones will be here making some announcements in the coming weeks. They've put in some money into that public transport, but when it comes to actually delivering the infrastructure, again, we see Dunedin as being ignored.
Yeah, it just seems to always be basically the very second fiddle. Should we look at Rachel Boyack from Nelson, since her region got played as the played off region?
Yes.
Yeah.
Apologies, was made by Rachel Boyack.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to take a call on this important issue for the people of Dunedin, but also for the people of the South Island and for the people of New Zealand in terms of the investment that we need in our health infrastructure. Madam Speaker, as the MP for Nelson, I stand in solidarity with the people of Dunedin who deserve a decent hospital that is going to serve their region and their community for decades to come. Madam Speaker, what concerns me greatly from the Minister's announcement today is that they are trying to use my community of Nelson as an excuse to not build the facilities that are needed in Dunedin. Yet the Minister has already made an announcement to downgrade the rebuild of Nelson Hospital, one of New Zealand's most ageing and growing populations. It will be the biggest project of our generation. Labor announced the plan last year and we gave the first round of money and the enabling works have been started, and yet the Minister had a plan to announce the master plan for the project when he came to Nelson recently, and that decision was scrapped, and he hasn't even taken a paper to Cabinet about Nelson Hospital. So don't the National Party dare use my community as an excuse to downgrade the facilities for Dunedin or any other community in this country. Now, Madam Speaker, my father built hospitals in New Zealand and he built hospitals in the UK. He built them in your electorate, Suze Reid-Main, on budget. On budget and close to it. It'll certainly serve the people of Rangitikei, the Whanganui Hospital, which he built on time and on budget. And my message to Simon Court is that public-private partnerships do not work. They cost more money, they take more time, they cut corners, and they do not deliver for the people in the community. Now, I have a message for the National Party about health infrastructure. Look at this graph. This shows the story of which party, now they're all quiet, which party delivers on capital infrastructure for health. Look at the blue graph. Look at the blue graph. Look at the red graph. Significantly more. Billions of dollars to invest in the likes of Dunedin, to invest in Whangarei, which Shane Reid is also planning to
feels
put
like
down
New Zealand version of Katie Porter.
And
billions of dollars
We need
for
some
investment from
Nickelback
Labor
in the
health
background.
infrastructure. How much did the government put into budget 2024? $100 million. Literally nothing. Where is the money that is going to be needed to build these projects? It's gone to landlords. It's gone to tobacco companies. Now, I might sound angry, and I'm probably the angriest I've ever been in this House, but I am bloody proud to be a member of a Labor Party that has a history in this country of building infrastructure, of building hospitals, of investing properly in public health, and saying that public health facilities for the people of New Zealand who can't afford things like private insurance need to be top quality. And they do cost money, Madam Speaker. To pretend somehow that you can be a National Party when Nicola Willis was advising John Key and Bill English, and she's now following the same playbook. Nicola Willis was a staff member during these little tiny blue graphs with no money, and now she's the finance minister who has only put $100 million into capital health infrastructure this budget. She's also shortchanged the entire health system by $1.4 billion for operational costs in that health system. So yes, I'm angry, because public health and the delivery of public health services to New Zealand is a fundamental. It is a critical, essential services for the people who desperately need those services. And in my community of Nelson, I was inundated by people last week at the Home and Gardens show who are incredibly angry that the plan agreed by Labor, that was the clinically preferred option, not the best option for builders, not the best option for the Cabinet, the best option that the medical professionals said. We should be building hospitals that the medical professionals say are the best for patients, because they are the experts, and this government is failing to listen to them. And so I stand here in solidarity as a Nelson MP, because every single community of this country in Aotearoa deserves a decent public hospital. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, she just launched a nuke at them.
Yeah. Now we did have Rajan. No, who was it? There was one. Frosty asked about how many does National have any South Island MPs? So yes, they do. They hold the seats of West Coast Tasman, traditionally a safe Labor seat. They hold the seats of Kaikoura, safe National seat. Waimakariri, which is a leaning National post-Christchurch earthquake. Banks Peninsula, which was historically a Labor seat. Selwyn, which is as blue as anything. Rangitata, usually a national seat, did flip to Labour at the last election, but hey, that's what happens when you have Andrew Falloon. Waitaki, safe national seat. Southland and Invercargill, safe national seat. So pretty much, 3/4 of the electorates in the South Island are currently held by the National Party.
And Southland has traditionally been a stronghold for the National Party. Southland is farmers and small businesses.
And that's where Bill English is originally from, because I think that's his old seat.
Bill English is originally from Dipton, yes, in Southland.
Has anyone else got that George Bush meme in their head? You know, that moment where the plane hits the second tower? That's the meme that came to my mind when I heard Aisha and Rachel speak. It's like, yeah, sir, it's like Christopher Luxon, the second plane has hit the National Party.
Look, I don't know if we can give that woman more electorates, but let's just give her more seats in Parliament because she was.
What was husband he said? Why do I hear Boston?
It's a shame you cannot stand and be elected in multiple seats in New Zealand. You can only stand for one electorate and one list position, but you cannot say stand for that. But she could always be what is known as called Ingrid Leary, is it for Invercargill, is the Labour, MP that kind of chaperones for the area because they don't have a Labour MP down there. So maybe she could have that for a few electorates. Maybe she already is in the case of Kaikoura.
Which, to answer the question properly, we do actually have an MP for National who comes and spends time in Dunedin, who I believe actually works here, who is their MP for Southland. We used to have Michael Woodhouse, who was National stalwart in the Dunedin area, but he's since retired from politics.
Yeah, because he got a very low list ranking on the thing and was a bit unhappy, so he went electorate only, knowing he wouldn't win. Okay, let's hear from Chris Pink.
Overseas Building Product Standards and Certification Schemes Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement...
Okay, that is completely irrelevant from the debate.
Yes, I believe so. At that point, we're talking about overseas elements. But I am disappointed that as the Minister for Infrastructure, one of the Ministers for Infrastructure and Construction Projects, he wasn't talking about this. Because
he does have a speech here for 2 minutes, but I don't know if it's trying to do something as like the debate's not finished. Let's see.
National Party call, so I'm going to take the National Party call. Honourable Chris Pink.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We've heard a lot from the other side about the lack of a new hospital in Dunedin. I wonder if the members opposite might remember who was in government for the last 6 years that did not deliver such a hospital. Madam Speaker, this entire discussion would not be necessary if the government of the day 6 years ago had gotten underway and actually built the damn thing. Mr. Speaker, we've heard about responsibility needing to be taken in terms of what this government had inherited, but if this government had inherited a hospital in the first place, there would not be need for a new hospital. A bit of reality needs to be injected into the conversation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we've also heard about issues having already been resolved. Well, that's really interesting because if the issue of needing a hospital had been resolved in the first place, again, it would be a moot point. We would not need to be having this discussion. The people of New Zealand, the people of Dunedin particularly, would have the healthcare services, the facilities that they need, that we're hearing so much about now from people who were very quiet about it in the last 6 years when, patently, a new hospital was not being built. Madam Speaker, the opportunity cost of the funding, the additional funding needed to build the hospital is such that not only is that funding not available for other aspects of healthcare in Dunedin or indeed across the country, in addition, the 6 years wasted by the previous government in which they were busily not building a hospital has seen construction costs rise hugely. It's going to be very topical in the House this afternoon, Madam Speaker. 41% increase in construction costs since 2019. A huge additional amount, even leaving aside the cock-ups and the poor decision-making in relation to this hospital particularly, and the delay therefore represents an opportunity cost in terms of other things that money could have been spent on in the space or indeed other things to improve the lives of the good people of Dunedin. Madam Speaker, the project as conceived by the previous government was on shaky foundations, poor foundations both literally and physically from the very start. We are putting in additional funding. It is simply not accurate to characterise that as any kind of a cut. Dunedin does not have a hospital now that was promised by the previous government. It will, because we are promising to get on and do it. We're going to listen to the people, we're going to get on and do it, and actually they will then have the facilities they need and deserve.
Chair, Madam Speaker.
In what way are they listening to the people? I think I'm a bit lost here.
Did they listen to you?
No, at no point. But he tells us they're going to listen to the people. And yet we've just had Chris Bishop down here telling us that they're not listening to what we actually want.
They've never listened to me. So, hey.
But it's a messy debate because as the person who is in charge of running infrastructure projects, Chris Pink, it is unusual that we have not heard anything from him down here in Dunedin. But I'm also confused why they keep going back to this attacking Labour. I mean, they've been in government now for a year and a half.
So, not quite a year, but they've been there long enough. I mean,
They've been long enough that
the amount of legislation, the amount of urgency they've gone through, you might as well think they've been in there for 3 years.
But they've also saying that the hospital was something that Labor kept quiet about and didn't make any complaints. I find that very hard to believe, considering there were so many issues with this hospital over the past 3 years that National made it one of their core campaign promises that they would actually finish it, deliver it to specs with everything that it needed, and they made it a campaign promise, and then turned around and broke that promise.
So I'm seeing questions in the chat asking why did Labor take so long? Like why wasn't a hospital built overnight? Why has it taken like 6 years to get to this point? You want to comment on that one, Troy?
Well, I talked a little bit earlier about the engineering problems that existed on the particular location and site, that it is reclaimed land, therefore the Environment Court stalled things down the way the Environment Court is supposed to do by making sure that it was actually built appropriately, that it wasn't going to sink, that it had adequate support to go to the height that they needed. They then had to ramp up the helipad to make sure that military planes could be able to, military helicopters could land on it if there is an emergency evacuation. Then they had to go through and reassess the plan. Then we had COVID, and as a result of COVID, they had to then go and reassess based on what the inflation was doing and work out how much the extra costs were going to be. Not to mention the fact that it took 1.5 years just to take the Cadbury factory down, because when a building had been standing for almost 100 years, they needed to make sure it was done safely and carefully. So it is a long process to get something this big up and constructed.
And also the Cadbury building, did it have anything to worry about with asbestos?
Yep.
It did. I don't know enough about that to be certain, but it definitely did.
That itself slows down demolition.
So,
well, exactly, because it has to be removed carefully.
Yeah, so that's why it can take 6 years to get to this point in development.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've done our dash on Dunedin Hospital. Let's hear what Uncle Shane Jones from the far north has to do about the Crown Minerals Amendment Bill first reading.
Oh, boy!
Yes. Uncle Shane, make sure you have the seafood on, since that's what you're famous for doing.
Science and Innovation Select Committee, sir, to consider the bill. The appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by 31st of October 2024, and that the committee have authority to meet at any time while the House is sitting, except during oral questions, during any evening on a day on which there has been a sitting of the House on a Friday in a week, in which there has been a sitting of the House and outside the Wellington area, despite Standing Orders 193, 195 and 196. The Crown Minerals Amendment Bill. For the benefit of the House and the broader community tuned in, I shall now focus on the key changes in this bill and explain why the government is pursuing them. Our government inherited, sir, a dire situation where gas supply has been tight and demand grossly exceeds supply. Why does this situation exist? It exists, sir, because of an ideological urge to reject the value of an indigenous resource called natural resource, an indigenous resource in New Zealand called natural gas that represents a key contingency fuel that offers security to New Zealand's energy system. An irrational belief that this valuable resource represents a threat to New Zealand's reputation, New Zealand's stamina economically. Our government rejects that ideological claptrap. We need natural gas to provide electricity generation at a time where our hydro lakes cannot service demand. Yes, there is an appetite for more renewable resources to create energy. Sadly, our current fields are in decline. We need more investment. But who will invest when regimes come into place in New Zealand and go out of their way to demonise and stigmatise investors, indiscriminately destroying rights, undermining certainty, and going out of their way to trivialise the ambitions of economic investors? Methanex, recently a large international company, halted all production, a type of deindustrialisation, a direct consequence of an ideology driven by this vain pursuit that New Zealand can be a world leader, in this vain hope that New Zealand alone will save the planet, something I personally reject. New Zealand must look after itself before it cares for the planet. Without secure energy, sir, without affordable energy, we are going to see the closure of industry in New Zealand, just as the last regime closed down the only refinery in New Zealand. That's why, sir, this bill will create additional certainty and enable investment to take place. It will reverse the ban on offshore gas and exploration put in place by the last government. It will re-establish New Zealand as a place attractive to overseas investors and halt the slip of our reputation towards a Venezuelan destination. Not only will the reversal of the ban create good outcomes for energy security, it will open up new opportunities and enable the Crown to receive fresh applications for offshore exploration. But at a more fundamental level, my message to Kiwis: the last government did not put a large sign up for the rest of the world to believe that we're open for business. They set up a closed-door approach that we were the hermit kingdom. No, this bill clearly identifies that we most certainly are going to trust in our own ability to deliver secure energy, and we will use gas, which is a better outcome for imported coal. I have taken account of the concerns of the industry. The bill makes 3 key changes. It will reduce the burden on permit holders. While continuing to protect the Crown, private landowners and ultimately the taxpayer, we will bring more flexibility on how mandatory financial securities are held. We will limit the trailing liability to the immediate prior permit holder. We're not going to go back to the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, believing that you can pursue liabilities to multiple corporate generations, having the effect of destroying confidence. Therein lies the ideological difference between this side of the House and that side of the House. They overstate risk and understate cost. In addition to that, we are going to ensure that small-scale mining can proceed with minimal bureaucratic interference. Now, something might be said, sir, about what is the impact on our emissions. We remain dedicated to an energy transition, but not at the point of hollowing out jobs and deindustrialisation. That type of fuzzy communist thinking has no place on this side of the House. I repeat, sir, natural gas is critical. It will have a place until at least 2050. Increases in emissions from gas supply is vastly preferable to our reliance on coal. But the reality is we need all of the options if we are to deliver affordable, secure energy. No one is going to invest in our economy, sir, if we cannot provide a menu of security. No one is going to trust a government, a regulatory environment, if indiscriminately their rights are going to be destroyed, as happened under the last regime. We're going to hear apocryphal stories that the planet is going to boil, that jobs are going to suddenly appear because of clean, green energy. Jobs follow investment. Investment dies at the feet of uncertainty and indiscriminate changes as a consequence of capricious bureaucracy, something that characterised the energy policy of the last government. In conclusion, sir, this bill introduces a set of changes to the CMA to immediately improve the economics of the petroleum investment in New Zealand and the regulatory efficiency of the Crown Minerals regime. It removes the ban on new petroleum exploration beyond the shore of Taranaki, signalling that NZ is open for business. It adjusts the decommissioning regime, moves away from these apocryphal stories, exaggerations, and we will have a response that is proportionate to the risk that is being managed, something sadly absent from the responses from the last regime. And it will boost gas production to improve the security of supply, something sorely needed by garden variety Kiwis businesses. I commend this bill to the House.
I can't.
Just for those who are wondering, Shane Jones, we had to turn up the speed because he was speaking so slow.
What was that about the Garden of Eden? I went to Catholic school and I don't recall the mention of the oil rig in the Garden of Eden.
How was no one laughing in the House? That was like, I was reading through the debate transcript because I don't watch the video, so I read through the debate transcripts, and I didn't prepare myself for how funny that was going to be. But I have so many questions for Shane Jones, and the first one is he refers to gas as an Indigenous resource, something that he is full of. Does Shane Jones support the fact that iwi, hapu and whānau who have customary marine titles have ownership over Indigenous minerals? So that's like your iron sands, your rock phosphates, your precious and base metal sulfides. Like, okay, he's in support of that, right? Is he? We're talking about Indigenous minerals.
Well, like the other one is, the oil refinery at Marsden Point was not technically shut down by the government. It was shut down by the private owners who owned it because the government sold it off quite a number of years ago. So it was private industry that shut down Marsden Point, not the government.
Are we also going to talk about Methanex, which is a Canadian company? I don't know how that ties in with New Zealand First, but
no. So Methanex has a methane plant in Waitara.
Yeah.
Which basically makes methanol product or something. It's about gas capture. Instead of running their natural gas through their plant, on the spot price market for natural gas in New Zealand got that high, it was more profitable for the business to put it into the main grid than it was to actually make what they specialise in. So that's the reason why for 2 months, 2-3 months, they shut down their plant while putting the gas that they have the right that they've extracted and have the rights to into the New Zealand grid. And Methanex are known for burning off excess gas in there. Like we stay at Chris and Daniela's, you can see the flare, you can see like the orange sky out towards the east of their house, which is 5-10 k's away from the Methanex factory.
And then he makes a weird comparison to Venezuela, which is I've got my notes here. It has sanctions on it placed due to government entities and individuals associated with the administration of Maduro. And it was the Trump administration that imposed economic sanctions to individuals and companies in the petroleum, gold, and mining industries. So how are we comparable to that?
I don't know.
Like, where is he going? And then he talks about communism, which is like, don't even get me started on that. I mean, I'm a socialist, but communism is not what he's describing.
I think what people who think communism is a negative thing think of communism as actually communism with a very big touch of fascism, which is not true communism. That is communism that went wrong, and they're probably associating the Soviet Union and indirectly the CPP from China, even that's not exactly a communist regime in the defines of what communism is meant to be about.
It's like, my guy, there's no Stalinists in Parliament. Like, point to the Stalinist. Where's the Stalinist? Where are the tankies? I don't know. It's like, I'm just over here saying, help me.
You've kept quiet, Troy.
Yeah, come on, Troy, let's go.
I'm just so moved by Matawa Jones's impassioned speech and speaking in terms of protecting something that he knows is dying. In particular, where he talks about how reserves are lessening and how we need to find more of it. There is no more. That's the point. That's why they're lessening. We're running out. I'm aware that there is more that could be looked for, but why? Why are we doing this? We made such a big step. The people of Taranaki were angry. It really damaged changes to it really caused negative changes to the economy when this bill was brought in. But to reverse it like this is just going to create an artificial bubble.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, green tech jobs are growing. I mean, Professor Cooney from Auckland University found that worldwide jobs in renewables reached 13.7 million in 2022, which was up from 7.3 million in 2012. So, the industry is growing. We just need more specialists.
New Zealand is now one of the leading countries for research into hydrogen as a transition.
Absolutely. I am pumped for hydrogen, man. Bring that shit on.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, now, would hydrogen run on petrol or diesel engines or both? Because LPG runs brilliantly on petrol-based engines, but does not really function on a diesel.
Right.
With minor modifications, you can actually use ammonia as a fuel source for petrol engines. The problem with hydrogen is that it's a very light gas. It's very difficult to store. And it's very difficult to store in any metal container. But as a liquid, ammonia is a little bit easier to maintain and look after. There is a downside to using ammonia as a fuel, though, because it's HN2. The byproduct of burning ammonia is nitrous oxide, which is equally as bad for the environment as carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, it's also produced 3 times the amount when you burn it.
Useful facts. Let's see what Dr. Megan Wood has got to say after Matawa Jones's speech.
Hopefully they're not laughing.
Mr. Speaker, Labor will be opposing this bill, and Labor will be opposing this bill in a very strenuous way because, Mr. Speaker, this is a dark day for New Zealand. This is a day when this three-headed monster of a government is taking New Zealand backwards. It is taking New Zealand backwards not based on any benefit to New Zealand, certainly not putting New Zealand first, but it is taking New Zealand backwards for the sake of it and for the sake of political sloganeering. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to spend the time of my speech reminding those on the opposition benches of the large body of climate
climate science that tells us about the need to keep oil and gas in the ground. I'm taking that as a given, and I'm assuming members opposite actually do engage in that literature. But, Mr Speaker, I am going to spend my time in this speech talking about how today signifies a time when the three parties of this government firmly plant in the ground their backwards-looking plan that is no plan. All three parties in this coalition are showing their true colours today. And, Mr Speaker, they will be judged by their actions for generations to come. This is a bill that certainly does not put New Zealand first. It puts New Zealand at risk. This bill is quite simply climate-denying, populist, right-wing virtue signalling. So why are they doing this? Let's go through the stated reasons why they are doing it. Let's read from the explanatory notes. They're saying it's to ensure that gas remains a transition fuel until viable and cost-effective alternatives are in place. Well, Mr Speaker, let's go through those claims. Let's examine it. Ensuring that gas remains a transition fuels. The reality, Mr Speaker, is entirely different. And they know that, Mr Speaker, because their own regulatory impact statement for the bill tells them that. Paragraph 37 tells them that exploration activity in New Zealand has been declining since 2014 and before the 2018 ban on new petroleum exploration outside of onshore Taranaki. And this is consistent with global trends in upstream oil and gas. So, Mr Speaker, they have it in black and white, that the fact is that gas production in New Zealand had been declining. And, Mr Speaker, they need to face reality. There is no guarantee that investors will come. Their own advice tells them that. And there is no guarantee that anything will be found. And even then, Mr Speaker, if they did find something, it takes on average 16 years to take it from exploration to production. So any crocodile tears and claims that we hear about how this is an immediate panacea for our energy situation are simply false. It will be 2040 at a minimum before we would see any of the gas from the reversal of this ban. But the Minister has come up with a plan of what he sees as the fact that internationally people are not investing in new oil and gas. It simply isn't there in New Zealand, and it hasn't been commercially viable for a couple of decades. The Minister has a plan, and that has been cocking up what inducements he can offer to offshore multinational big oil and gas companies to come to New Zealand. When his officials told him that he couldn't really use the taxpayer's dime to underwrite the risk for these multinational companies to come to New Zealand, he's gone back to the playbook of Muldoon, Mr Speaker, and he said he wants to put in place Muldoon-esque 30-year off-take gas agreements, once again putting the New Zealand taxpayer at risk. Not content with this, because, Mr Speaker, absolutely have no illusions. This bill is the wish list of the oil and gas industry. This is not the wish list of the New Zealand public. This is not putting New Zealand first, and certainly the Minister's plans around decommissioning, once again putting New Zealand taxpayers on the hook for the hundreds of millions of dollars that it costs to clean up big oil and gas's mess after Tui, are once again going to be on play, because this is a government that is beholden to the oil and gas industry. They do not have New Zealanders' interests at heart. They have the big end of town.
Okay.
I think that sums it up pretty clearly, though, doesn't it?
They have the
oil industry at heart.
I mean, I had an epic speech written, but it wasn't like that. She blew mine out of the water.
And for those at home, we had to slow down to 1.5 to understand her. She doesn't quite speak as slowly as Shane Jones.
I'd like to point out as well, she is also from the South Island, and when she was Minister of Energy, she had a plan that would have benefited Otago. Just pointing that out.
Was that Lake Onslow?
That was Lake Onslow.
Oh, I'm so sad that was gutted. Oh man, the engineering behind that would have been beautiful to watch.
Yeah, and relatively easy to do. That area is quite good for that particular, and already has a gravity-fed reservoir about 50 kilometres up the road.
Should we look at Steve Abel or Simon Court?
Bring on Simon Court, because I've got a speech prepared.
Simon Court.
Mr Speaker, nothing says buy now, pay later than Labor's announcement in 2018 they were going to ban oil and gas exploration. Kiwis are paying for that announcement now in higher energy bills, factory closures, jobs being lost in the regions. Thanks, Labor. When I heard that news, I was working as a civil engineer, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, that's insane. What country in the world would pull the rug out of its energy industry, which supports industry, businesses, jobs, livelihoods, people? Well, the former Labor government was that insane. No government in the world has said they care so little about progress and people that they would, instead of promoting the use of minerals and resources that make people wealthier, they would just manage them, whatever that means. But that's what the previous government did. It was that issue, amongst many others, that led me to ACT and led me to this Parliament. And that is why I am so proud to be here today supporting this bill, a bill that ACT campaigned on, and the policy changes that are in the ACT National Coalition Agreement, to update the Crown Minerals Act, to restore its role as promoting the use of Crown minerals, to explore the potential for a critical minerals list
where such minerals would have a preferential pathway to access. That's a separate piece of work that Minister Jones, Minister of Resources, is undertaking with my support. To repeal the ban on offshore gas exploration. Now, I know this is going to trigger the anti-progress, anti-human lynch mob in the Green Party and their military wing Greenpeace, but they should know that the ACT Party and the coalition government are actually doing this for them. Because ACT supports mining so that the Green Party and Greenpeace can have mobile phones. Now, we don't agree with them live streaming the thuggish behaviour when they locked up all of those terrified people at Stratera's office yesterday, but we still want them to have a mobile phone. That's why we support and promote the use of minerals. And we support removing the ban on oil and gas exploration so that the Green MPs and their mates in Greenpeace can fly around on jet planes to climate conferences and back and forth to Parliament every week. We want the Green Party and Greenpeace to have the same benefits that we think all New Zealanders should have access to. That is what oil and gas and mined minerals deliver for all of our society. Now, New Zealanders need better jobs, they need higher incomes, their businesses they work for need to get back on the productivity cycle. And that is what mining, minerals and oil and gas for energy and raw materials offers New Zealand. New Zealanders who wonder how they're going to get ahead in life and are thinking about a career in mining or the oil and gas industry will have another option. Until now, it's been, how much is a plane ticket to Australia? We want them to have an option to be able to work in these highly skilled, high-paid industries right here in New Zealand, particularly in the regions and the provinces where they might choose to live because that's where they and their families feel comfortable. New Zealanders need more certainty about gas supply, and that is what repealing the ban on oil and gas exploration offers. Increasing the availability of natural gas means that manufacturing and high-paid jobs are more secure. It means that businesses can invest with confidence when they can obtain the energy and the raw materials they need in their supply chain. It means that New Zealand is more resilient to energy and supply chain crises, such as we experienced during the COVID lockdown period. It means that household energy bills are more affordable than without Indigenous natural gas. Because nothing says this coalition government is delivering real change, like repealing the ban on oil and gas exploration and promoting the use of Crown minerals. I'm proud to support this bill on behalf of the ACT Party and all the New Zealanders who voted for this coalition government. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
As a former ACT supporter myself, I too like Indigenous gas. Now, especially in the form of Shane Jones.
I'm really confused. This bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but this bill is an amendment bill specifically about natural gas offshore in Taranaki, right?
Yeah.
What part of natural gas goes into making a cell phone?
I don't know. And this bill isn't about copper or lithium extraction. It's about gas and Crown-owned minerals, which
my
are gold,
LPG
silver, and
device.
uranium. I don't like how much uranium goes into a phone. I mean, thanks for the phone, but I don't understand. Like, look, this is I'm gonna speak as a greenie, right? We've got to take practical steps to reduce emissions. If something can be switched over to being powered by a renewable energy source, we should do that, okay? Because extracting gas and burning it up is not going to help New Zealand achieve its emissions budgets, nor is it going to help with our climate or our economy, okay? We could have had hybrid ferries by now that produce 40% lower carbon emissions, but this government cancelled the IREX project. Airbus is currently working on hydrogen-powered commercial aircrafts, set to release in 2035. And electric cars, we've already got them. But this government cancelled the Clean Car discounts. And
we also
that's gone down.
We had the first, what do you call it? Cross-water electric flight in the world going from Blenheim to Wellington. And it used the energy cost of $6. Whereas they said if it was a Cessna plane, it would have used $60 worth of avgas.
Do you know what's anti-progress and anti-worker and anti-job? Not supporting the green tech industry, right? Not supporting our scientists, not supporting our researchers, not supporting our engineers, not supporting people to transition from mining jobs over to clean tech jobs or green tech jobs. You know, that is anti-worker and that is screwing us over, and that's going to bite us in the ass by the time 2030 comes around.
Market.
Yes, anti-free market. Yes. I mean, green doesn't just stand for the environment, it also stands for the economy.
Yeah, back in May, the government announced that they were cutting funding to the Callaghan Research Institute, who are one of the leading organizations for green tech here in New Zealand.
Yep.
And they cut research to them. They cut research to the hydrogen. They decreased funding to the Hydrogen Research Institute here in Otago, as well as a lot of funding to research organizations across the universities and private companies in New Zealand. So you're exactly correct. They've cut funding to all of these areas that could research the alternative in order to bring back support for oil.
A dying industry.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, sorry, as a prior ACT supporter, it's stuff like that that made me leave. because I actually do care about the environment and I do care about the economy, and that's why I switched.
Yes, you did the reverse of a Brooke Van Velden.
I did indeed, yes.
Shall we see what my favourite MP from Te Tai Tonga, Takuta Ferris, has to say?
Takuta Ferris.
Tēnā tātou. Tūana hau ki te wāhi ngā kōrero Pāti Māori mō tēnei o ngā ture, kia nei ko te Crown's Mineral Amendment Bill. We lovingly call it the Ram Raiding Truck and Trailer Bill. This bill and the Takutai Moana Bill are a truck and trailer, straight into iwi coastlines all around the country. As I plot my way around the coasts of this country, Ngāi Tahu, bottom of the south, Ngāi iwi o te Tauihu, they all not interested, not interested. Ngāti Kaungunu, Ngāti Porou, the whole eastern seaboard, not interested. Whakatohe had to deal with Rena, not interested. Tikapa, Hauraki, not interested. Maria Menos crew, Te Tai Tokedo, not interested. All the way down to Taranaki, not interested. Gee, not interested. It's a lot of not interested iwi. And this government, the bill, aims to lift the ban of offshore oil and gas, opening up the opening up of onshore exploration across the country and even in Dockland. Dockland, I mean, come on. Dockland, really? Clean green, New Zealand, Aotearoa skiing and all of that. Shiny rivers, all up for grabs, pretty much. The government talks about the declining reserves. Well, surely if you had declining reserves, you'd be really focused on a transition plan rather than a 2050, we're going gas to 2050 plan, like old Mr. Jones wants us to believe. So transition to renewable energy should be the focus, not just fossil fuels and maintaining the status quo. But you guys are keen on the status quo, we all see that. Additionally, if I reflect on the Pāti Māori policy, the statement says, end new onshore oil and gas permits, withdraw existing onshore and offshore oil and gas permits within 5 years and aim to decommission sites by 2030. And here's the rationale. The rationale is Māori have been the vanguard at the front of resisting international big oil and seismic testing interest in our coastlines. And all of those iwis I just described have all put up fierce defensive action over the last 10 years. So who are they? Well, 2011, Te Whānau Apanui stood up. If you don't know where Te Whānau Apanui is it's where Rawiri's from. They stood up and pushed back against Petrobras deep sea oil exploration. And they won. They buggered off. That's in the Raukumara Basin, if you're wondering about it. All the fishers in Aotearoa, that's the Bluefin Run. The Bluefin Run, right? In 2013, Sir Mark Solomon, he led the opposition against Anadarko's arrival in Kaikoura, seismic testing. So, Ngāi Tahu, Sir Mark Solomon, not interested in it. In 2015, the hapu of Te Tai Tokedo, where Maria Meno was from, resisted the deep sea oil exploration of Statoil, one of those. And in 2016, my home iwi of Ngāti Kaungunu, the eastern seaboard of this country, their rohe starts just over the hill, over there, goes all the way up to Mahia. They launched, in defence and protest against one of the biggest seismic blasting ships, the Amazon Warrior, they launched their Wakahaurua fleet to sail out to sea on a vessel that's powered by wind, that's travelled to Rarotonga, Tahiti, Hawaii, San Francisco, San Diego, all the way down to Mexico, out to the Galapagos, across the Solomon Islands, and anywhere else in the world you want to go. That's where that one's been with no power. They stood up and pushed back against those foreign interests. And they're all foreign interests. None of these big companies are from Aotearoa. None of the money they propose to make is going to stay here. It's going to go overseas. And they're all getting a kai and kōrero with Matu Shane down there. So after that 2018, in Wairarapa, when my cousins on that Mataua Maui, the Wakahaurua, they stood up and did a big haka, like literally. They opened up the airwaves on Channel 16 so everyone could hear and did a haka from Kahungunu. It's called Tika Tonu. And they knew the fellas on that ship would hear. So after that led to 80 coastal hapu signing a declaration unanimously rejecting exploration that was ratified by the National Iwi Chairs to oppose all seismic testing and oil exploration in Aotearoa. I doubt Shane's talked to any of them. So you see why we oppose it, and we oppose it.
I swear this guy's related to me, because we're both Kai Tahu and Ngāti Kahanunu. I'm just trying to figure out which hapu he belongs to.
Now, was that one of your two choices to vote for at the general election, or are you on the general roll, Troy? I can't remember which one you're on.
I'm on the general roll, so I vote Dunedin. Dunedin. It used to be called Dunedin North. If I was to switch the Māori roll, then yes, I would be in Te Tai Tonga, because as someone pointed out here earlier, Te Tai Tonga covers the entire South Island and Wellington.
Yes. That you could place whether you're in Oban or at Newtown Market on Saturday. If you're on the Māori roll in Te Tai Tonga, you can go and place a non-special vote.
Mm.
Unless your name is Linda McGregor, where they sit there and have a lot of trouble trying to sit and fight. I'm on Te Tai Tonga. Yeah, we can't find you on the wrong entire roll.
I don't vote for Te Tai Tonga and vote for the general electorate purely because I'm not Tangata Whenua, I'm not Ngāi Tahu, and because I'm living in the Ngāi Tahu rohe.
Right.
And even though I know those people, I don't know them necessarily well enough. Having said that, Takuta, I'm aware, lives in Wellington. He used to be part of the Māori Research Institute at the University of Waikato, University of Victoria, University of Wellington, where he was an academic. And yeah, most of the voter base for Te Tai Tonga is actually in Wellington.
Yeah, it is quite a unique one. And I think you told me that both Reno Turakatni and his auntie, Wheta Turakatni Sullivan, were both Wellington-based during their 10 years as MPs.
Reno definitely spent, I mean, he has a house in Wellington, but he also lived in Christchurch. But there has been a Te Kātane, with the exception of Takuta. A Te Kātane has held that electorate almost every election since it was created.
Except from 96 to 2011 was the one period where a Turakatni was out of the mix. But yes, you are right. It's been either Edereda Turakatni, Wheta Turakatni Sullivan, or Reno.
Yes.
Yeah, it's basically, and I mean, Edereda did take that electorate back in 1932.
But it is interesting that Te Tai Tonga this time has swung from a Christchurch-based MP to a Wellington-based MP.
Yeah, you are right there. Yes, I wonder if he does have his private pilot's license. Now, here's one where I think I think we need to show some MPs who literally do patsy stuff in speeches. And I gather this because it only looks like there's a minute in the speech. Only because people sit there and complain that we don't show enough coalition MPs in here. So
bring them all on. Yep, let's go.
Suze Redmayne.
Mr. Speaker, natural gas is critical to our energy security. Without gas, we've got to rely on more expensive Indonesian coal brought in from overseas, other sources of energy. I have seen firsthand the devastating effect of not having a reliable and affordable energy supply. I've seen the devastating effect of the deindustrialisation of rural New Zealand with the closure of Winstone Pulp, the loss of 170 jobs. Don't you care? The devastating social and economic impact on Raitihi, Oakuni and Taihape. In fact, the impact of it across the Rangatike. We've also seen the trickle-down effects. The Napier Port profit warning. Yesterday, Kiwi Rail announcing that loss of jobs directly as a result of the closure of Winstone Pulp. This bill, Mr. Speaker, gives confidence to industry. It will foster economic development. It'll grow New Zealand. It'll give us a surety of supply, affordable and reliable energy. That is what we need, and it is a vital part of our plan to get New Zealand back on track.
I'm so woke that I do care. If anything, I want the government to spend money to help industries transition. I don't want people to lose their jobs.
And I thought he could cover it, even though his speech was a minute. It was a bit longer than what I thought.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was just going back, I commend this bill to the House. I actually was surprised there was a little bit more in that speech. And it's good that she mentioned about the job losses in Oakuni.
I was just caught up in her discussion about how oil and coal are important and the implication that she thinks oil and coal are interchangeable. Gas and coal are interchangeable. I hope she is not putting LPG onto her coal fireplace at home. You know?
Yeah, that would be really bad. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
It'd be worse than putting coal in the LPG barbecue, yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I trust it with a barbecue during the summer months, but okay.
Yeah, that's actually a damn good point. It definitely, it definitely does question. You think it questions things in there, and I wonder, is she one of those people who goes up to the LPG pump and tries to put it into the petrol car? I mean, I've heard of a person, like the videos of showing a person with a Tesla going to the petrol station and can't find the petrol nozzle. I wonder if she would be the same when it comes to, LPG. Was it, LPG with a shovel with a bag of coal?
But I don't understand what loss of gas has to do with Whinstone Pulp. Whinstone Pulp closed because of the rising costs of running the factory. But having increased gas isn't going to reduce the cost of energy when the problem we have is that we don't have enough production of energy, even with the gas reserves that we have. We haven't run out of gas or coal for our power plants. That hasn't been a problem. What is the problem they're trying to solve with this bill?
I don't know.
I don't. Yeah. I mean, it's not like the bill comes with, say, we'll help fund converting your vehicle to LPG. And I'll be honest, I did get a quote. $5,000 it was going to cost to convert my APV van from petrol to LPG. $5,000.
That comment there that Tawhiti just posted. Yeah. Once again, Tawhiti, you win the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm actually. We've had another request for a panelist to join the show. Oh, yes, I think I know exactly who that is. Yes. Now let's go and see Glenn Bennett.
Glenn Bennett.
The previous speaker just talked about the deindustrialisation of regional jobs and don't we care? Well, we care, and that is why in 2018 the decision was made. It was around certainty, it was around looking to the future. And the future was one we've all agreed to, which Sir John Key signed up to, which was around decarbonising our economy. And so making that very clear back in 2018 was around how do we move forward from here. The Right Honourable Dame Jacinda Ardern said the transition to a zero-carbon economy must start somewhere. And we began that in 2018, and we were getting on with it, and now that's all being peeled back. And why? Because I live in Taranaki. I live in the place where this has been impacted the most. And it was around creating certainty for the future. Because at some stage, someone has to flick the switch and say, we are going to move forward. We didn't ban. We, of course, didn't reissue any new offshore permits. Obviously continued with onshore. That continued. But it was around creating certainty for our transition because, as we know, Mr. Speaker, there are many, many consented renewable energy projects that are ready to go. There's things that we can be doing. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to make a quote, and it says this. Today is a historic day because there's been a clear line of sight as to what happens when three parties come together for a common purpose. That was the Honourable Shane Jones back in April of 2018, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, things have changed, and he's found some new friends, and he's flipped the lid. But the challenge I have in this is the fact that spoke around things like his mukapuna, around the challenge for them and their future, and what he was doing back in 2018 for their safety and for their future. We've got countries like Ireland, Spain, and France, and Greenland, and Denmark, and New Zealand for a little bit longer, who have made commitments around ending oil and gas exploration. And I want to talk briefly, because there's a lot of stuff going on in this legislation, and we are specifically talking, obviously, about oil and gas. But you look at the reintroduction of offshore permits, you look at the change to the decommissioning rules, and of course, this government, the taxpayers, you and I, the people on the streets of the towns you live in, have spent almost $500 million in the decommissioning of the Tui oil field, which was an action that was taken by a company that upped sticks and left us in the lurch. So we created regimes around the decommissioning, which again are about to be repealed. There's also the amendments to the purpose we've talked about, but also small-scale gold mines, which I'm curious to know about. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I'm listening to some of the comments that were made in the departmental report and other statements on the table, and some Taranaki iwi are concerned around this, and we need to heed and listen, because there is a lot going on the government side of the House that is going on, which really is an attack on iwi. And when we look at, and I look here in terms of the general explanatory notes around removing the restrictions on access to conservation land on onshore Taranaki. Now, we need to delve into this more and understand this, because, Mr. Speaker, I know that the people of Taranaki do not want that. I know that the majority of people in Taranaki are on the journey, are on our 2050 roadmap to a low-carbon economy, are working with things like green hydrogen, things like offshore wind, things like solar, things like biofuels. And those are spaces and opportunities that we can take and we should take to ensure that we decarbonise and that we be good ancestors in this House, that we make courageous decisions. 2018, we make courageous decisions today, potentially, and cross the floor and support the stopping of this piece of legislation. Now, is anyone going to come back and start digging for oil and gas? Well, the fact that the last major discovery was in the year 2000. The last major discovery was in the year 2000. I think not. I think we are looking for better ways. We're looking to innovate. We set that standard in 2018 around looking to the future for the sake of Taranaki, for the sake of the nation, for the sake of us moving forwards to decarbonising and find new ways to fuel Aotearoa New Zealand.
Katie Neiman.
Okay.
In the chat just now, Tawhiti has made a really good point that in New Zealand we don't use enough insulation in our homes.
Yep.
And this government has also made moves and started talking about changing the recent introductions of changes to insulation standards across New Zealand. The recent insulation standards require heavier amounts of insulation in places like Dunedin, Southland, and Queenstown, places that are actually colder. If this gets rolled back, it will mean that we need more heating, because this insulation needs more heating. But again, the problem that we have with our energy sector is not that we can't get enough gas or coal. The problem we have with our energy sector is that we don't have enough plants to create energy in the first place. So we can mine all the coal and gas out of the ground. It's not going to help if we've got nothing to convert it into electricity.
True.
I mean, it's like having a set of railway wagons running out the street. Look, we've got 20 coal trains going to Huntley Power Plant, but it can only process one wagon a day.
It just I don't understand what the point of this bill is. They're not solving the problem that they say they're trying to solve. If the problem is the energy crisis, don't create more offshore gas farms. Create more power plants.
It's like this. When I went to one of Karuna Mafu's what's it called, National Party meetings, he asked me to come. He invited me. I came. They said to me they'll promise to drill more on the ground to get LPG out to power my vehicle, but they won't help pay for the conversion cost. The conversion cost was the barrier, not drilling the gas out of the ground.
Talking about insulation, right? I think it's kind of funny how you just said, Troy, that National kind of wants to roll that back, right? That wasn't that something that was done in collaboration, like the initial insulation bills and stuff like that. That was done in collaboration with the Greens, National and the Greens working together.
It was, yes.
Yeah. Is that too woke now? Is insulation woke?
If you're not going to put enough insulation into their houses in Otago and Southland, you're going to need another hospital.
Yeah.
Well, this ties them very well.
It all ties itself together. Yeah. It's got
Now,
a little bow on it.
See Katie Cummins' short speech
from 2018 that we are here to correct. This facepalm moment was a foresight of the fact that the plan hadn't been made properly. What we were doing then, that we are undoing now, was the inability to plan for the future. A future which now we see has companies like Panpac uncertain about how they can proceed. $800 a megawatt, sorry, from one week to $9.38 the next. This is unmanageable and untenable. Now, the most astounding thing is that members opposite won't even support our fast-track approvals bill, which is going to help us get a renewable energy built faster. We need to do both of these things so that we don't have an absolutely unmanageable and untenable energy sector and energy crisis in New Zealand. This is important, and we have these natural resources, and to go and ban them in the first place, to make us have to go back and do this as we are now, while fast-tracking the ability to build these renewable energy sites, whether it's wonderful wind farms, solar farms, hydroelectric, geothermal. This is important for us to do, and we need to make sure that we do this quickly alongside other measures to reach our targets, and I commend this bill to the House.
Where's the environmental minister for the what? It's like, come on. It's like for the fast track bill. It's like, where's the minister of environment?
So does it mean I can put solar on my roof without my landlord's permission?
Yeah, do that.
I don't know. I think the current one might actually be for it, considering the owner of the house the owner of the house is the head tenant's parents. But that isn't it like well, maybe we can put wind turbines on houses in Wellington. I mean, it's a windy city.
Why not? Why not? We
that
need
would
all the
make a
power
lot
we
of
can
sense.
get.
It would make a lot of sense. And a wind turbine is actually a lot cheaper than putting up solar panels.
Yep.
And it functions a bit more than 12 hours a day on average.
Especially in Wellington.
Yeah. No, actually, I remember in 2019, there was a 3 kilowatt wind turbine that was going away off Richard's house in Houghton, not Richard's house, down the road from Richard's house in Houghton Bay. And I remember taking a picture from the distance on my phone and posting on look, there's one of these in use in Wellington, because that was one of my policies at the time was, for a renewable energy grade that can work on there in the same way as the insulation scheme. And one of the things was, it didn't just have to be solar panels. You could look at wind turbines. And like some people go, oh, but that could hit birds. I go, what, wind turbines are this big?
What bird is going to fly into that? Oh.
Yeah. It was like that, because they were comparing it to the ones at the Te Apiti wind farm.
But also, the birds can see it.
The birds have eyes. Yes, last time I checked, the birds can see.
With solar panels, when Queensland started introducing rooftop solar panels, they introduced a government subsidy to help homeowners be able to install them on plants and on houses, and it worked really well. In fact, it worked almost too well because eventually the suburbs of Queensland became more effective power generation plants than all of the coal plants in Queensland.
Oh no, we can't have that.
Not when coal's their biggest export, no.
Maybe that's what happens when you have a Labour government come in and fix for a snap election. Yeah. Oh, well, now let's get to the more nitty-gritty part of today. Laura, I'm sorry, we're going to be covering you again.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. So let's get your submissions in. The marine coastal areas. Takutai Moana Customary Marine Titles Amendment Bill. Your submissions close on the 15th of October. The more important one, the bill we just discussed, you've got till Tuesday to get your submission in. Get typing your submission tonight and have that ready to sit there and go. The social workers registration amendment bill? That's next Sunday. So please make sure you have it in. The taxation annual rates for 2024-2025 emergency response and remedials bill closes on the Wednesday, the 9th of October. Now, this isn't parliamentary, but it's important. I know it's a bit far away from your place, Troy, but the Aturanga Manawatu Tanador Highway Toll Road submission.
Yes.
Yes, and I will be putting my submission in there, and my biggest one is a toll gantry is going to make it very difficult for oversized vehicles to go there, and we'll have to go to the Paitoa track, which would be sitting in there, and I'm even putting the bold move in there of actually stating if you insist on tolling the the Manawatu Tanador Highway, is to gazette officially Paitoa track and Saddle Road International State Highways. And I've even gone to the point of giving them suggested designation numbers.
Yep.
Yeah. So those are my bits on the submissions. Comments of the show, because Troy, it's your first time being on the order paper, and it's been about 4 years since you've previously appeared on Hits and the Balance YouTube channel, Facebook page.
Thank you very much for having me. I definitely enjoyed it. I am an academic with the University of Otago these days, so would be happy to come back again for sure.
Awesome.
Oh, yes. Well, you're welcome, and we need more South Islanders.
Yes, we need more South Island representation.
I think most of Wellington needs more South Island representation.
Yeah.
Yes. No, we definitely need more South Island representation. Yes, no, we definitely need that. Yeah, so thank you for joining us, and thank you, Laura, for being, as I think our audience like to call you, our Chewy.
Missing the band, missing the charisma, missing the, yeah.
I mean, put it this way, I think you do more research than he does.
I like Chewy. Chewy's good.
I like him as well. He's been smack on, but yeah, I know you do your research.
Man, he talks off the cuff, and I love it.
Actually, Troy probably remembers that. As you probably remember from 2019, how many people did their speeches off the cuff, and how many of them had their notes, including like Leslie Salinger, how we pretty much knew his speech off by heart with the cue cards.
It's funny because now as a lecturer, I have to teach students, don't go off the cuff. Make sure you practice. Make sure you rehearse.
Yeah.
But going off the cuff can show how much you've retained.
It can. It also means you can ramble.
True.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we know all about that one.
yes, we definitely know that. That's why you need timers and buzzers.
Yes.
That's something we learned from 2022 to 2023 is we had to have a timer. Because in 2022, some people were very good at regulating their times, and some people literally just rambled forever.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was something, and it depended where you were. And the worst ones were the big shows that had a lot of candidates. That was the worst time you had to rambling.
Mm.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to become a panelist, because we do need to expand our panel pool, I will put the QR code up there doing it. If you want to support the platform, we've had 2 new Patreon members to sit there and subscribe, but feel free to join us on Patreon and support the platform. That will sit down there and help pay for the Restream account and the Render Forest account to do the graphics. And hopefully someday it can pay myself a little minor salary and pay Stacey a little minor salary at some point, but that will be a little bit of a while away. But if we can become self-sufficient, that's good. And another announcement, at the end of October, we will be having our official set for It's in the Ballot shows planned for the 2025 schedule. And I did have a person from, was it Rotorua Lakes District Council, make contact about bringing it to Rotorua, which is actually quite good. So, and that's an area where we're keen to cover, considering our area seems to be Hamilton and Wellington at the moment. It's really weird that every single... we did the Tauranga City Council elections. Yeah. Unfortunately, the ferries are a bit unreliable, so we might do remote shows for Dunedin if they do come on the path.
Yeah, well, given the size of some of our districts down here, something like It's in the Ballot would be incredibly useful for us.
Awesome.
Yeah, the 2026 for the general election, we're going to see if we can do all 16 South Island electorates. We are working on a plan that will do that, but our biggest problem is the word called those ferries. That is the biggest prohibitor of crossing there. And even James Meagher actually mentioned at one of the select committee hearings was like, you can always bring it to Timaru. There's a flight at this time to go there. I go, yeah, I don't think you have seen excess baggage. And I showed him a picture after the select committee meeting, and he just goes, yeah, that won't quite fit on the plane. Yeah. And yes, for they can do episodes like, yes, Lower Hutt is on the plans. That one isn't, and so is Upper Hutt. Upper Hutt's even going to the point where I'm in talks of seeing if there can be some funding to go forward with it. That's the biggest one, is trying to have the dollars to pay the bills, because doing It's in the Ballot is not cheap. Even when all the staff are volunteers, there are still things like accommodation to pay for. And that's the biggest prohibitive, is the word accommodation. Yeah, let alone having a great crew who can try and keep everything running like clockwork. Yeah. So yes, let's sit there and do it for our panelists. We've got after show drinks if you want to keep chatting away. But for our audience, we will see you next Sunday at 8 p.m. for the order paper.
Thank you for watching the Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened, so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/its.